NVIDIA climbing today, recovering from yesterday's broader chip sell-off on the heels of a disappointing earnings leak from ASML. That stock still sinking today. NVIDIA also getting hit with news that the DOJ is considering capping AI chip exports to some countries. Joining me now to discuss all this is Bernstein Research's Stacey Rasgon. Stacey, it's good to have you here. It always sounds like there's a ton going on around NVIDIA.
Always.
Certainly there is. Not to mention we have, Jensen is really, on the circuit out there, kind of preaching the future at every turn as well. And yet the stock's, it's up 0.7% this week. It's kind of hanging in there onto this gain. So separate out what matters and what might not for this one.
Yeah, you bet. So yesterday took a hit along with the rest of the sector on two things. One was the ASML earnings leak, which was interesting in its own right, and some of the export control news. I think any hit that it took on the ASML report was probably not really justified because while ASML's report, as we all know now, was not great, the one sort of bright spot from it was AI demand. It seems like AI demand is still off the charts. It's about the only thing that is, but it's still very strong, and clearly like that benefits NVIDIA. I do wonder if some of the hit yesterday was more around some of the export control stuff. And what's going on there is there were some stories that suggest the U.S. is considering, I guess they suggested capping the licenses that NVIDIA and other AI chip vendors can use to sell parts to other countries, particularly, I guess, in this case, the Middle East. I'd say, and though I'm not sure it's that big of a deal, I guess we'll see. But caps, in my opinion, are not bans. They already have they're already under licensing arrangements with the Middle East. They have to get licenses to ship there anyways. And frankly, the other outright bans that we've seen in the past haven't really slowed them down at all. So I'm not terribly worried about that. They seem to be more incremental than anything else. And we saw the stock yesterday was coming down before the ASML. They dropped sharply and then kind of recovered a little bit afterwards. And so I think today it's kind of relaxing a little bit as it's clear that the ASML news is not a direct read across, and maybe the export control stuff isn't as big of a deal as people might have been worried.
Talk about the bulls and this idea that maybe they're already there. In fact, there was a Bank of America survey, they do the fund manager survey, the Mag 7 for, I think it's the 19th consecutive month. That's the most crowded trade. And you can say that maybe that's contrarian, but another consequence of that is, are there dip buyers? Because everybody is already all in.
Look, you have $7 trillion on the sidelines. And I mean, I could tell you every day, the skepticism I see globally from investors, valuation, is the trade done? Is AI hype? It's still there. So I'm not saying it's not a crowded trade, but I believe a year, like I said, 6 months from now, $3-4 trillion market caps will be the narrative. Nvidia, Apple, Microsoft. And I think that's all driven by we're only in the second inning of the game from a hockey perspective, the early first period. In terms of where I see this AI trade going, which I think tech bull market roars well into 2025, potentially 2026.
All right, let's stick with the chips and talk about NVIDIA, because NVIDIA right now coming off a fresh record high. You can see in the pre-market, at least, off just about 0.7%. Yahoo Finance's Jared Blickery is here with a breakdown of what the technicals are telling us. Jared.
Thank you, Shauna. Indeed, we did get that record closing high yesterday. Still don't have a record intraday high, but I wanted to show you what's happened over the last month. We've got this really nice liftoff since basically the end of September, but we're still within a very large trading range. And this goes back 5 or 6 months, depending on how you slice and dice it, but we are right there back at the Rubicon. I would strongly suspect that we managed to get another intraday high, record high. But the question is, are we going to have a false breakout? Because that's on a lot of traders' minds. It's something that really hasn't happened with NVIDIA in a long time. Happens with Bitcoin all the time, but it's a possibility. So if I put a 3-year chart on, we can see that there have been several instances of consolidation. In 2023, that was 6 or 7 months, the entire back half of the year. It didn't take off again until 2024. So we've seen this before, and traders are just trying to ascertain, all right, are we going to be able to punch through and maintain that momentum? Well, things are looking pretty good for some of the broader indices here. I'm going to show you the NASDAQ 100, and here's the NASDAQ 100 year to date. It's not quite at a record high just yet, but here's the NASDAQ 100 equal weight. It just notched a record high yesterday, along with the S&P 500 equal weight. So my point is, we have a lot of momentum to the upside and a lot of breadth. I think it would be uncharacteristic to have NVIDIA sucker traders in only to have it go down, but we have seen that happen before. And I guess the difference being that NVIDIA has always resolved to the upside. So eventually there's going to be a fake out that kind of catches traders. But you did mention in the intro that NVIDIA is about to overtake Apple. And I just wanted to show those numbers for you. I'm going to put market cap. This is the NASDAQ 100. Here's Apple, $3.516 trillion. And here's NVIDIA sitting at $3.386 trillion.
Or is this just another day in the market? Opportunities abound in one of the fastest growing companies on the planet.
Yeah, I think it's very hard to move to the sidelines or to go all out bearish for NVIDIA. I think about 91% of analysts at this point have a buy rating on shares. We did see some analyst action, not necessarily, well, some in response to this news. We saw Cantor Fitzgerald actually come out and say that that ASML's disappointing outlook has nothing really to do with NVIDIA, saying ASML explicitly said, in no way, shape, or form does the government's updated outlook indicate any change in the AI growth story. And I think that it's important to note that that ASML actually said AI demand remains strong. It's some other areas that are contributing to the weakness. So shouldn't necessarily be bad news for NVIDIA. We also had Evercore reiterate its NVIDIA is a top pick with an outperform rating and $150 price target. I should note Cantor Fitzgerald has a $180 price target on NVIDIA shares, so it's currently trading around $130 right now. So, sees quite a bit of upside, $50 upside from current levels. So analysts on the whole still very bullish on this name. It's
clearly, as you suggest, making its peace with whatever all this is. And I know there's a way also of saying, listen, this stock is where it traded 4 months ago. It had an absolutely massive run. It gets to $3.3 trillion market cap. And then maybe it needs to kind of hang out for a little while and figure out exactly how long we're going to be in this lucky position of demand outracing supply into next year. So where do you think that sits in terms of investor expectations and how the stock is positioned?
Yeah, it's interesting. You sort of look at the last couple of months, it was in a lot of news flow. The stock took a big hit several months ago on the Blackwell delay rumors. And while it does seem that there were some issues there, it really looks like they've worked through without any problems, right? So it didn't really have any impact on the demand trajectory. And I'd say since the stock I went to $90 or something like close to it, and so it certainly recovered off of that. I guess that was a great entry point in hindsight. And look, going forward, I mean, all of the checks on AI demand, like I said, they're going to sell everything that they can make. And you mentioned Jensen's out there. I think he's been on your channel more than once in recent weeks and sounding very enthusiastic. It's the one bright spot in the whole semiconductor arena right now. It's the one thing where we can definitively point and say demand is probably going to exceed expectations, even expectations that I think are going up now. Some of the other areas in semis, I wish you could say that. You can't really say that, right?
Taiwan Semi is out tomorrow, and so investors will have chance to take comfort as it of course does a lot of business with NVIDIA and is a little bit more exposed to the winners. How, as an analyst, I mean, how much do you look at that ecosystem to decide what's going right in the AI trade?
Yeah, and look, that's why we've been in Asia, twice in the last, call it 7 weeks. It's like you have to, they're not all winners. So you have to separate who are the winners, who are the trends, who you bet on. So even yesterday, when NVIDIA is down on this news, that's a buying opportunity because it really has nothing to do with NVIDIA. We're talking about Intel and everything related to that trade, which is really legacy chip. So I think that's why we spend so much time trying to figure out who are the second, third, fourth derivatives of AI. And that's why every time the bears come out of hibernation mode, scare some, I think it actually creates opportunity in a lot.
A while ago, we spoke about NVIDIA, and you had said that it would be something that you held for years. And ever since then, you held it for a while, but more recently, you've been selling it off. How much do you have left of it, and why have you been selling? Can you see yourself getting back into it again?
I've made so many mistakes in my investment career. One of them was I sold all my NVIDIA, probably in somewhere between 800 and 950. I think it's 1,300 on that stock now.
You own none today.
I own none, and I own none the last 400 points. It was a big mistake. In terms of AI, and by the way, when I saw you at that conference, which was 18 months ago, I fully expected to own it for years, but I think it was 300 and change. And as I also said at a media interview, I'm not Warren Buffett. So I thought I was going to, but what changed is it tripled in a year, and I thought the valuation was rich. We are big long-term believers in AI, and there's still many ways we're playing AI, particularly the infrastructure that's been built out to support the power needed. And yes, I think NVIDIA is a wonderful company, and were the price to come down, we'd get involved again. But right now, I'm licking my wounds from a bad sale there.
Well, despite U.S. efforts to limit foreign access to AI chips, China has found workarounds either through front companies, reports of smugglers, or with help of U.S. chips specifically designed to skirt sanctions. With us now to discuss, we want to bring in Brian McCarthy. He's the chief strategist and managing principal at MacroLens, a research firm dedicated to helping investors better understand the Chinese macro economy. So, Brian, help us better understand the impact of these restrictions. How significant has it been, and this potential escalation that we could see going forward? How big of a worry is that, a worry at all for the Chinese tech community?
Yeah, it's unclear whether yesterday's news suggesting there could be tightened restrictions on the UAE and Saudi Arabia is or isn't related to those countries possibly funneling chips to China, because it's very hard to sort of bottle up China's access to these chips through third parties. On top of that, I thought Akiko's report really hit the mark. There's widespread smuggling. The New York Times a couple months ago reported about a large flea market in Shenzhen where you could buy, as much as $100 million worth of smuggled chips. The Wall Street Journal has reported on Chinese companies getting access to these chips via cloud servers that are located outside of China. So there are many, many holes in this net. And, it's not nothing. Clearly, the cost of accessing these chips has gone up for Chinese entities, but the net has a lot of holes in it, and it's really unclear how effective these controls are in, slowing China's ambitions in the AI and other related spaces.